Praise be to God. Today's Bible reading portion is taken from Joshua chapter 7 to 10. In yesterday's meditation, we had started from the book of Joshua. We're going to be seeing from chapter 7 today. In yesterday's chapter, we could see on how the walls of the Jericho was being defeated by the people of Israel. In chapter 7, now we see how the Israelites are defeated at Ai. In Joshua 6, God forbid any Israelite from taking spoil from Jericho, but one of the Israelites disobeyed. This disobedience brought grave consequences on the camp of Israel. Joshua sent a small portion of the army, that is 3,000 men, to fight against the city, but they were routed and 36 Israelite men were killed. Chapter 7 verses 10 to 26. God told Joshua the reason Israel lost the battle. It was because someone in the camp disobeyed him and took spoils from Jericho. He gave Joshua a way to identify the culprit. In the morning, Joshua was to call all of the Israel to him and select one of the tribes by lot. After the tribe, family, and household was selected, the individual would be identified. The next morning, God did tell Joshua what exactly had to be done, and he commanded, and Joshua selected a man named Achan from the tribe of Judah. This man confessed his sin and told Joshua he found a beautiful robe, some silver and a gold bar in Jericho, and coveted them. Men were sent to this person's tent, and they discovered the items buried there. And as a punishment, all his household were stoned and then burnt at a place called the Valley of Achor. When this was done, the anger of the Lord was over. From that, chapter 8 talks about how Israelites make war with the person a second time. After the disobedience of the person Achan had been dealt, God told Joshua to return and fight against the city. At God's instruction, God sent an ambush for the enemy army. He stationed 30,000 men behind the city and told them to remain hidden as the main part of the army attacked. Joshua set another ambush of 5,000 men on the west side of the city between Bethel and the city. Early the next morning, the king met Joshua on the battlefield. During the battle, Joshua ordered his men to withdraw, acting as if they were losing the battle and needed to retreat. When Joshua had drawn the enemy far enough from the city, he signaled for the ambush. When Joshua saw smoke rising from the city, he ordered his men to turn around and re-engage. In total, there were 12,000 people from Ai who were killed, and the king was hung on a tree until evening, and then his body was buried at the gate of the city under a heap of stones. Verses from 30 to 35 talks about when Israelites came to Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. Joshua built an altar on the mount as Moses previously was instructed, which we can see in Deuteronomy chapter 27. Joshua wrote a copy of the law of Moses on the uncut stones that formed the altar. The entire camp of Israel gathered at the mountains to hear a reading of the book of the law. Another half of the mountain Ebal and the Ark of the Covenant, which was between them. Every portion of the law was read in the hearing of the people, and all the blessings, including all the curses. In chapter 9, we could see how the Gibeonites trick Israel. When the king of the coast, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites heard of the overthrow of Ai in Joshua chapter 8, they were terrified and planned to ally together to fight against Israel. But another group of people, that is the Gibeonites, had another plan. Some of the Gibeon dressed themselves in old clothes and patched sandals, and put out worn-out sacks on their donkeys, and dry food in their banks, and approached the camp of Israel to speak with Joshua. They lied and told Joshua they had traveled a long distance from a faraway land to make a covenant of peace with Israel. In the end, Joshua agreed to make a covenant of peace with them. Here the text mentions that Israelites leaders failed to ask God for counsel when deciding what to do with the Gibeonites. In chapter 9 verses 16 to 27, after 3 days the Israelites learned the Gibeonites were lying and they were actually their neighbors. Even after their lie was exposed, Israel did not make war with them because they had sworn an oath of peace before the Lord. Instead of killing the Gibeonites, the Israelites made them their servants for carrying water and cutting wood. Joshua had asked the men who tricked him why they had lied about the identity, and they told him it was because they were aware of God's command to Israel to destroy the inhabitants of the land. They knew their only chance to survive was to pretend they weren't the residents of the promised land. Moving to chapter 10, here we can see how the sun, moon were remaining still. In chapter 10 verses 1 to 15, it says, when Adonai Zedek, who is the king of Jerusalem, heard about the destruction of the city Ai and the peace treaty between Israel and Gibeonites, he was afraid because the Gibeonites were warriors. The king of Jerusalem decided to attack the city of Gibeon and enlisted the help of the kings of Hebron, Lachish and Eglon. When the Gibeonites learnt about the 5 kings coming to attack them, they sent to Joshua for help. Joshua and the army marched all night from Gilgal to Gibeon and attacked the 5 kings. Joshua caused large stones to fall from heaven and kill Israel's enemies. At Joshua's request, God made the sun, moon stand still so that the Israelites would have daylight to pursue the retreating soldiers from the army of the 5 kings. Verses 16 to 27 says that the 5 allied kings hid themselves in a cave at Makkedah. When the Israelites found them, they rolled a stone in front of the cave while they finished pursuing the enemy forces. The 5 kings were brought out, killed and hung on a tree until evening. Verses from 28 to 43, it's the end of Joshua 10, which lists a series of kings and territories that the Israelites conquered as they pressed further into the land of Canaan. All these territories mentioned, there were also the cities which were devoted to destruction by Joshua and the Israelites. And Joshua captured all these kings and their land at one time because the Lord God of Israel fought for Israel. That brings us end to chapter 10. I hope it was useful to all. Thank you again for listening and God bless.